Welcome to another episode of Foreign Correspondents Deeper into Hitchcock podcast. My name is Michał Oleszczyk and I'm joined as always by my co-host
Sebastian Smoliński. Hello, Michał. Hello, everyone.
Good to hear you, Sebastian. We are recording this 11th episode of our podcast at a very special time. And it's a small miracle of technology that we still are able to keep up our conversation about Hitchcock, even at times as troubling as these. We are in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, which is felt as acutely on this side of the ocean in Poland, I'm in Warsaw, as it is on the other side of the ocean. Sebastian is currently at the Kościuszko Foundation Scholarship in Ohio, and we are both as anxious and as glued to the news as everyone globally, I think, right now. But still, I think that we can find some comfort in the fact that we are discussing some very, very old movies and we are sticking to our guns and sticking to our passion that is film. And, this time we are moving on to a film which I can say I really love, despite its many contradictions and many tensions and probably also inconsistencies, a film called Murder. Last time we talked about Juno and the Peacock and Elstree Calling, two films that probably nobody would call Hitchcock's best. But this time, a really interesting film, I would say. Murder, a film that premiered in August 1930. Hitchcock made it for British International Pictures, so we are still at the BIP stage of his career. And a film that is another crime story, only third so far in Hitchcock's oeuvre. The other being, of course, The Lodger and Blackmail. This is another entry into Hitchcock's crime film genre, and his first whodunit, based on a book by Clemence Dane and Helen Simpson called Enter Sir John, which Sebastian was adventurous enough to retrieve in an original copy of the first edition from the library that he's close to in Ohio. So, and my understanding is that you actually read the novel. So how was it?
Yes, I can honestly say that I've read the whole thing, not just first several chapters. And yes, that's correct. I believe, as you mentioned at the beginning, we are in the time of crisis, and it doesn't really matter if you're in Warsaw or I'm in Ohio. I mean, probably we would also record in the same way if we're both in Warsaw right now, right?
Yes.
So that's a little difference, but that's my privilege here that I could rent this novel. Borrow from the library. We have this wonderful institution of Ohio Link, which links all the libraries, all university and public libraries here, and I could borrow this book, which is, I think it's unavailable in Poland. It was never translated into Polish because it's not a major novel, but it's really very interesting, and I have, that's correct, I have the first American edition of this novel, printed in New York. It's the same year as first UK edition, 1928. And I enjoyed reading this novel. It was a rare occasion for me to read finally some source novel or play for Hitchcock movies. I must say that we're kind of at the beginning of our adventure still, so I plan to read more books or plays that Hitchcock adapted later, but this is one of the first opportunities I had with Murder, and I must say it's illuminating to compare the two. It's very interesting to compare, to see what Hitchcock did with that. And there are some wonderful changes on his part. Some of them are described by Hitchcock scholars like Charles Barr, who, of course, pays a lot of attention to original sources, to the sources of Hitchcock's movies. But what I want to say is that I find this book very enjoyable. It's, if you like Agatha Christie, I think you may like Enter Sir John. It's a very light-hearted novel. There is not much tension in it. It's not a crime novel which is supposed to, scare you or really keep you at the edge of your seat. That's not the case. I would say it's a comedy with crime element. It's very very funny. It has distinctly British humor, which is translated by Hitchcock into the like motion terms. We see that in Murder. It's funny in many ways. I liked many elements about it. One of them was that, and this is something that is in the movie. We'll discuss it. I was reminded of the Polish movie Fug by Agnieszka Smoczyńska, which premiered in Cannes 2 years ago, as far as I remember, because the main heroine, the woman who is accused of murdering her colleague, they are both theater actresses. That's the beginning of both the movie and the novel. There is murder in the very first scene of both works of art. So she's accused of the murder because she's found with a poker in her hand at the scene of the crime, and one of the lawyers, her defendant, argues that she was in this state of dissociation. She entered this fugue, and it's in the movie they just briefly mentioned that it's shortened, but here in the novel you have a serious discussion of that, like this courtroom scene in which the defendant and the psychiatrist discuss this fugue. So I found it a bit funny to find that in this old 1920s novel. So that's one of the many pleasures I had reading this novel.
Great. I really hope to read the novel one day. It's a film, and basically, just to summarize the plot, it is a whodunit. There is a murder at the very beginning. A young girl has been murdered. There's another young girl who is the chief suspect, who claims that she was in this dissociation state at the time of the murder, that she doesn't have any recollection of the moment of the murder. And there's a trial by jury. The jury says that the woman was guilty, and she goes to prison. And there's this one juror played by Herbert Marshall, who is Sir John Menier, who is the Sir John of the title of the novel, Enter Sir John, who is almost like the Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men. He's the only juror that claims that he has doubts and that he actually thinks that the woman may be innocent, and then he simply starts an investigation which runs throughout the movie, and it's the main plot of the movie. It's the first Hitchcock film that really follows this, time-worn pattern of an investigation. There's a clear character of the investigator. He is also made interesting by his class status, because he's definitely above many and probably most of the characters in the film. He's an aristocrat, Sir John, and there's some humor wrung out of the fact that he's very refined, and that basically people he meets on this investigation are all financially and in terms of class relations are below him. What's interesting is that Sir John is an actor, so it's all taking place in a theater world, and there's a long investigation, and ultimately, of course, we will spoil the movie for you, because that's what we do here at this podcast. The guilty man is found, and the interesting thing is, and here we enter the strange confusion of this whole story, is that he is a half-caste, probably a homosexual. He is an actor who is impersonating female characters on the stage, and who also is a circus performer. He does a trapeze number, which actually ends the movie, and it's a trapeze number to end all trapeze numbers, let's just say. So, and this we won't spoil for you, or we will maybe later on. But basically, it turns out that the man killed the woman because she was about to reveal the secret of his origins to a woman that he loved. So here the homosexual angle doesn't really work. But basically, he was so ashamed of being a half-caste, meaning that he had some black blood in him, as one of the lines in the film indicates, that he was, capable of going as far as killing, so as the secret is not revealed. And from my understanding, I only read the chapter in the Charles Barr book. In the novel, it's much more clear that it's actually his fear of racial prejudice on the part of the woman that he loves, that he doesn't want her to know that he's half-caste because he feels that she would despise him, because she knows that, this cultural racism, which was basically rampant at the time, was ingrained in her to the point that actually she could even look down on him. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. Of course, the irony of the situation is that she knows that he's a half caste, and in a way, I mean, at least what she says is that she doesn't care. She likes him anyway. But yes, Charles Barr, I think his comments on this part of the movie are very illuminating, because this is something that certainly Hitchcock had to remove or maybe change a bit, because in the novel it's much more clear that the heroine, her name in the novel is different, by the way. It's Martella Baring. Here it's Diana, right? Yeah. So in the novel, the heroine is born in India. So she has, I mean, that's what this man says who committed the crime, that she internalized, this attitude towards probably, the local population, this condescending attitude towards local population and towards half-castes, of course. So this is really racially very interesting narrative, racially speaking, in terms of how it presents the race, and we can call it, and I think nobody called it that way, but in a way it's a passing narrative. Of course, probably nobody called it that way because we are not really following this man Handel Fane, right? So this half-caste character, we don't know what's his daily life like. We don't kind of support him in his endeavors because he's a just supporting character who turns out to be a criminal. But this is very interesting, and what is also interesting, and Charles Barr mentions that, I think, or the other scholar, that in the German version of this movie, because Hitchcock simultaneously was shooting the German version, which is much shorter and has less extravagant visuals, as far as I know. Although I haven't seen it, I must say I haven't seen it. It's very difficult to get the copy. So in the German version, it's changed. He's not a half caste, because that was supposed to be difficult to understand for German audience. I wonder if it really was, but that was the idea of producers. And Handel Fane is no longer, that half-caste, but he's a fugitive prisoner, I mean, who escaped from prison. That's the change. There are many changes like that in this German version, which, of course, reinforces our idea of this story as being very British.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. I actually saw the German version. It's actually on YouTube. It's called Mary. The problem is that, unfortunately, it has no English subtitles. So the problem is that I saw the version, but I saw only the visuals. And I don't speak German, so I don't know what happens there in terms of dialogue. I mean, visually, of course, it's quite similar. It's much shorter. It's only 77 minutes, and it's not as exuberant in terms of camera movement, and but I have no idea what they are saying. So it would be interesting to know what type of script changes were made. The only two changes that I wanted to mention, and as I said, at least visually, you can see it on YouTube, is that first of all, the guy playing Handel Fane, whose name is of course different in the film, he's completely different physically. He's like this slender, quite beautiful man. He's like like he's a model or a dancer. He really looks very good, and that's not the case with the British version, where he's like kind of ugly, like he's definitely not beautiful, like he's like a character actor. So here he's strikingly handsome, That's interesting. He doesn't enter the circus ring in this exuberant feather costume, which is funny because I would say that probably, a transvestite character would be much more welcome in Berlin of 1930s
exactly.
than in
at the end of 1920s, right, or beginning of the 30s.
in London. So I was surprised that actually in the British version we have this exuberant feather costume that he is wearing. And one very funny detail is that at the very beginning of the British version, there's this supremely Hitchcockian and sleazy shot of a woman changing into her underwear where the murder is everyone is crying murder on the street, and we see this man and a woman, a man and a wife, putting on some clothes because it's middle of the night and they want to see what's going on. And Hitchcock stages the scene in a very sleazy way, very sexist, because of course we see only the shadow of the man being putting on his clothes, but the woman is fully exposed. I mean, as fully as possible at that time, and we see in detail. Hitchcock lingers on the detail of her putting on a pair of drawers onto her knees. So it's I think it's almost obscene, how he focuses on this very intimate detail of a character that isn't even a character. It's just like, I will show you some legs, And the funny thing is that in the German version, the underwear that the woman is wearing is completely different. It's like this very primitive, heavy, Teutonic Germanic underwear of this Hausfrau. It's not sexy at all. It's basically like this extremely practical, thick fabric that probably German housefraus were wearing at the time. So it's a funny little detail. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see. And even Charles Barr says that he doesn't speak German, so he doesn't know what the characters are saying. But someone should finally just make those subtitles, and we could see what are the differences.
I agree. Although we should remember that Hitchcock himself said that he could understand German a bit, but he didn't have the full control over the dialogue. I mean, he himself said that he didn't really understand what actors are saying. Right. So he was disappointed with that. I mean, he knew that probably he couldn't really direct performances in a precise manner because of his lack of understanding of German language. So yeah, but certainly it would be worth to compare the two.
Yeah, so that's just a footnote. Also, one thing that I was quite shocked by, I saw Murder many years ago. It was my revisiting of the film that shocked me into realizing that it's really very kinky. The whole idea of this guy, dressing up as a woman and murdering and loving this lady and being a half-caste. It's so trashy. It's so trashy.
It is.
And it's really very early incarnation of this this whole genre of the murderous gay character, like Cruising, The Fan, Windows, those 80s movies that had this murderous gay character. And of course those movies, they have this strain of homophobia in them, but they're also fascinating because they are, exploring some taboo subjects that weren't really spoken of at the time. And interesting thing that I read, I was quite surprised that the British censorship, at the beginning there is this certificate of British censorship, the BBFC, that says it's an adult picture. It says that it's for adults, but I was surprised that they would allow themes like that. And I got a gift, a present from my friend Odie Henderson, and I want to thank him because I think he's actually listening to our podcast.
Thank you, Odie.
Yes, he gave me a book actually signed by the author. It's a very new book that I just started to read. I didn't read the whole thing. It was published last year. It's called Hitchcock and the Censors, and John Bilheimer is the author of it. And I only read short section, but it's actually on British censorship of that time. And what I was surprised to learn, and it may be relevant, is that British censorship of the time wasn't really focused on sexual themes. They were focused on political themes, and on social themes. So they wouldn't allow showing workers striking against factory owners. That was complete taboo. And they wouldn't allow to denigrate any nation, like especially Germany, Nazi Germany, which were sort of protected at the time. You couldn't say anything bad about them on film in the 30s. But in terms of sexual stuff, they were much more lenient. So that may explain this, and I just want to thank Odie for this edition, because I would never probably get this book otherwise, and it's an interesting edition, so I will definitely, read some more of it and learn how Hitchcock fought against censorship in his career.
This is fascinating, and I'm thrilled that we have this book in our, in our, let's say, common
mutual
library.
collection.
Yeah. So
yes, mutual collection.
But this is very interesting what you say, because like I must say, after reading the novel and rewatching the movie, because I also saw it several years ago, but I remembered like not much. I just remembered the first shot, which is this very beautiful tracking shot when we see one window after another. That's another
rare window.
Yeah, signature Hitchcock shot, definitely. So I didn't remember much, but I was surprised when I started to, dig up the feminist scholarship on this movie, because we are entering the period slowly. Once we'll reach The Man Who Knew Too Much, we'll start to enter the period when there are like many analysis of each movie, right? And so we have like lots of stuff to choose from, because Hitchcock is probably the most commented upon director ever. But even with Murder, we have several interesting works. One of them is an essay by Tania Modleski, so very popular feminist scholar, and her book, The Women Who Knew Too Much, is like a classic of feminist Hitchcock scholarship. So she writes a lot about the question of assuming feminine identity in this movie, both by Fendel Hayne, so the murderer, and by Sir John, who is in her view has many so-called feminine features. So I just wonder, because I find her essay pretty convincing in the way that the story is to a large extent about femininity and masculinity, as most Hitchcock movies are. But I must say the claim that Handel Fane is this prototype of a gay character does not really convince me. It convinces me that it's a prototype for Norman Bates, whose sexuality, speaking in Freudian terms, is pretty complicated. So, but I don't find Handel Fane like a prototype for the characters of The Rope. I think because of the certain confusion that I think Charles Barr really nicely kind of solves. This character is too eagerly read as a gay character. Of course, I think it's the type of the performance that Etsy Percy shows may be read as this kind of like gay performance, judging by 1930 standards. But still, also the famous line by Miss Baring, that it's impossible that this character is in love with her, or that she could be in love with her, right? Because that's the question Sir John poses to her, to the accused woman, that you're in love with him. No, that's impossible. So we can read it both ways, right? It's impossible because he's half caste, or it's impossible because he's my gay friend, right? So what do you think about it? What do you find convincing in regard to Murder? I don't think it's the most important thing about the movie, but certainly it's worth discussing, because that's probably a topic we'll be coming back to many times.
Right. Well, I think that this whole half-caste thing is as much hokum as the whole thing in Psycho, because when Simon Oakland, this psychiatrist, appears at the end of Psycho and delivers this ridiculous explanation that's like a parody of an explanation, really. I think it just reveals that it's just so bogus, this whole... I mean, at this point in his career, Hitchcock is not as refined, as to make it into that ironic ending. But I think it is an ironic I mean, he doesn't even. I don't think he gave a single thought to seriously considering, the racial politics of this film, or what does it mean. I mean, it's just the whole film is so much about confused identity and slipping in and out of roles, literally on the stage, because we see in a wonderful scene actors entering the stage, leaving the stage, slipping into character, getting out of the character, assuming a character's voice, losing the character's voice. This is something that Sir John also does when he tricks the older woman into believing that he just spoke in a female voice, and there's so much editing that plays with our perception of identity. We think that we see something actual and it's actually a performance. We see a performance and we think that it's actual happening. So I think the whole film is about mistaken identity. Even the solicitor, the lawyer at the trial of Diane, she looks like a man. She's cast identically in the British and German version. She's like this butch, like a woman, like almost like the idea of a refined lesbian of the time. So Hitchcock is extremely, I think he had so much fun into just throwing those perverse, or non-normative elements into this big giant stew that it's brilliantly confused, I would say. That it's I for 1 second I couldn't read this movie as a serious indictment of racism, for example, because it's too crazy for that. It's a crazy film with this wonderful decision to cast Herbert Marshall, whom I love.
That's a wonderful decision.
I love Herbert Marshall. By the way, I think he's very sexy. He has a wonderful voice. He of course was in Ernst Lubitsch films, and his probably finest performance is in Trouble in Paradise.
2 years later only, right? So very soon he will. Mm-hmm.
He had a wooden leg because he was a veteran, so he didn't move very much, so he doesn't move very much on the screen. He usually, stands there, but his voice is mellifluous and this like delicate irony in the whole performance. So here I love that he is the detective, because with his delicacy, with his refinement, with his aristocratic traits, he's almost like this, like a good spirit of this film, like all this gender confusion, all this race confusion, all this class confusion, and he's simply there to deliver the truth in a Shakespearean way, because he does exactly what Hamlet does in Hamlet. He sets up the play to reveal the truth. And there's a wonderful phrase, I don't know if it was in the book, you can tell me if you remember it, when he says that I would like to create something that the critics would call a highbrow shocker. A highbrow shocker. And I think this is exactly what Hitchcock is trying to do throughout his career, to make a highbrow shocker film. And probably, Psycho will be the absolute masterpiece of that ambition. But it's I loved it. Plus this surrealistic touch of the guy walking on the carpet and actually flooding his it's like walking on dough or like on a waterbed. Like he's so anxious that his feet sink into the carpet. A wonderful surrealistic touch. I don't know, like who else would do something as crazy, at that time.
I found it a bit over the top in the sound era, because that's certainly the trick from silent cinema. But I think your thoughts are brilliant on both the acting of Herbert Marshall and the general mood of the movie, which is a bit strange. I think highbrow shocker, I think it appears in the novel, but I'm not 100% sure. But what I wanted to add to the Shakespeare dimension of this movie is that there are like 20-something chapters in this novel, and each one of them begins with a quotation from a different Hitchcock play. So that's another reason for you...
Shakespeare play.
I said play. Hitchcock play, yes. I meant, of course, Shakespeare play, so that's another reason for you, Michał, as a Hitchcock... both Hitchcock and Shakespeare lover, to read it. So yes,
Yeah, I would love it.
so that's definitely, and probably that's also the reason why Helen Simpson invited Clemens Dane to collaborate with her, because Clemens Dane was, a theater person. Helen Simpson was more of a novelist. So that's why we have this, some of the real stuff of the theater life at the time. I totally agree with you. I think this is marvelous that Herbert Marshall was cast as this character. Also, as far as I know, it was his first performance in a sound movie. So this is pretty amazing that Hitchcock somehow discovered him, and it's difficult not to read his performance through the lens of, his Lubitsch performances. Although this one was first, his performance in Murder was first. But when I was rewatching Murder, I was thinking about, of course, Trouble in Paradise and Angel. I mean, his performances in sophisticated comedies. I think he's a great actor. To develop this kind of, as I mentioned, mood that it's semi-serious, it's funny. It doesn't really make much sense when you try to dig deeper, the structure, for example, of the movie. What I lack is what I lacked in the novel as well. I mean, Sir John is a very sympathetic character, but I think this kind of a character who's too perfect, too refined, too suave to really believe in him, is a bit outdated, and I think it works perfectly in Ernst Lubitsch. But here I think Hitchcock could just add some, something, as you mentioned, something non-normative to this character, something to make him a bit stranger, a bit more idiosyncratic. I think he's just too perfect to be true in a way, but still I think Herbert Marshall makes great use of the script and delivers a great performance. Because what I mean is that there are many peculiar or strange secondary characters in this movie, supporting roles. But still, I think what is really visible in the movie with Sir John as a main character is that you don't really feel that he's, trying to challenge or overcome some obstacles. He will do it. Also, in the novel, he's described as this guy who's always the best and who always wins, and that's what happens finally. So, but that's maybe something if you expect Murder to be a thrilling story in this ordinary sense, as Blackmail could be thrilling. Because I agree with you that it's more of a I think we can even call it a spoof on whodunit, right? In a way, it's not. I think Hitchcock is not really preoccupied with, developing the suspenseful narrative in this movie.
Absolutely, and I think there in the early period there are 3 films in Hitchcock's ever that I feel are brilliant spoofs. And Rich and Strange is another one. Number 17 is another one, and I love those movies because they have so much fun in them and irony, and also this very sophisticated sense of of using suspense to actually tickle you and to make you laugh in many ways. And then I also find it beautiful that Hitchcock's final film, Family Plot, basically goes back to exactly that mode, of being a spoof of a mystery instead of being really a mystery. But I also found it interesting that on this DVD that I have, it's Studio Canal, the Murder. There's also an alternate ending. I don't know. Did you see the alternate ending?
No, that's what I wanted to ask you, because in Charles Barr book there is this shot in a taxi when Sir John and Miss Bering are in a taxi, and I haven't seen it in this Canal version because I was just streaming that from Canopy. Okay. So I haven't seen the alternate version.
I don't recognize the shot in the cab, but the alternate ending basically is that because in the movie that we know, he reads the letter from Handel Fane, the mystery is solved, and he says something that I'm forgetting now, and then there's the cut. And we are already in the happy ending. She's leaving. She's approaching him. They kiss. Camera pulls back, and we see that this is a theater stage, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like a double ending because it's a happy ending, but is it a happy ending for them as a couple, or do they just play a couple on the stage? That's a very sophisticated ending, and the alternate ending here, which is my understanding, it wasn't used. I think it was something probably that the producers wanted to use. It's much less imaginative, because in between those two scenes in the alternate ending, there is a very, very flat scene in which basically Sir John explains to Diane that now she will perform in a play that he will write, and she's almost crying because she's so happy that she's leaving jail, and he says, "Oh, don't cry, save those tears for the stage." And then there's a cut, and we are on the stage. So it's like, to eliminate any confusion. But what's beautiful in the version that we know is actually that we are confused. We think that, this is the happy ending of the film. No, this is actually a play that they are performing in. But this movie is famous for its use of sound, and of course there's the famous scene of the internal monologue where Herbert Marshall is looking in the mirror, and there's his voice in the background, and there's Tristan and Isolde playing in the background as well, which was actually played by a live orchestra on the set. Now I associate this piece of music squarely with Melancholia,
right.
von Trier film. There's also Beethoven's Fifth in the beginning.
At the very beginning, right.
So there's some classical music, but also there are some very nice sound experiments. All again very funny. The first line of the dialogue in the film is actually indecipherable because it's like blah 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 blah. And then the guy puts in his fake teeth, his dentures, and he speaks clearly. So that's, I think, a very nice sound joke. But what did you think of this celebrated sound layer of the film?
I liked them, and I was surprised by them, because when I was watching the movie for the first time, I think I had problems with understanding everything, because I'm not sure if I had subtitles then, and it was poor quality copy. And now when I was watching it again, I was surprised that, some 40 years before Robert Altman, Hitchcock is experimenting with, simultaneous soundtracks, meaning that maybe not soundtrack simultaneous, because technically it wasn't very sophisticated, but certainly the idea was that, we have this overlapping dialogue. So I liked it, and the joke you are saying, you are describing with the false teeth was not in the book, so that's certainly something new. Also, this almost like a musical moment or a choir, as Charles Barr, I think, names it, when the jury is, proceeding, and they want to force Sir John to change his mind and admit that, probably, she's guilty, and then they say something like, "What do you say to this?" or something maybe.
Any answer to that, Sir John? Any answer to that, Sir John?
Yeah, so they almost like sing it. It's almost like a musical scene. So yeah, I liked it. It's certainly, these moments are now, this is something we, I think, pay attention to now, because they're like, these clever touches. But I must say, I like the idea of using Wagner in the scene, Tristan and Isolde, because we agreed upon the spoof nature of the movie, that it's really a joke on a whodunit genre, which might make sense also when you think about it, that Hitchcock says he didn't like doing whodunits, and he didn't make many, right? So maybe it makes sense that he made some kind of a spoof. So when you have this scene, you have Sir John standing in front of the mirror, you have his internal monologue, and you have this music. It's really, so overwhelming. I mean, the power of the music and the monologue, it's like almost like Laurence Olivier staging Hamlet, right? It's almost this kind of poetics, which, it's not really, we don't really know why. I mean, one of the I think maybe less successful parts of the movie is that I don't believe that the actress who plays Miss Bering, which is accidentally, her name is Nora Bering. I don't know how they found the actress with the same last name. I just don't believe that she's striking enough for Sir John to, for him to fall in love with her. This is something that is very explicit in the novel. I mean, in the novel, Martella Bering, because that's her name, is really striking and very she's an independent woman, very sure of herself, and really, she has this magnetic quality that. So I believe maybe Angelica Houston or Glenn Close or somebody like that would, have equal power. But I just don't believe this particular actress and her performance makes it, convincing that Sir John next day really has this internal monologue when listening to Tristan and Isolde, so like the ultimate doomed love story, right? So I find it funny in this context.
Absolutely, that's a great remark. And slowly dwindling to an end on this, I would say that this movie is twisted enough for me to regret that Brian De Palma never remade it, because that would be a great De Palma. Because De Palma made so many Hitchcock, spoofs and homages. I would love to see De Palma, sinking his teeth into this tangled piece of funny trash. So it would be great that didn't happen. Also, just to tell you what a priceless object you had in your hands when you were reading the book, I just checked on Amazon, and the first edition of this book at Amazon right now is $900. So maybe you should consider losing it, quote unquote.
Yeah, maybe I should kind of, yeah.
No, but
yeah, that's a good idea. No, but certainly it's a good idea to somehow make it available for readers.
Yeah, that would be great. So that would be fantastic. Yeah, and I would say my final remark on this would be that this is a film I really enjoyed. This is Hitchcock at his most inventive, and he's playing around with ideas, and it's not a stiff film like The Manxman was, for example, or it's not an orderly film. It's a messed up film, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, we see these Victorian aesthetics really cracking in this movie. I mean, it's we're discussing his silent movies. We're saying that they have this Victorian morals ingrained in them, and I think in this movie he's trying to maybe not blow it up to refer to De Palma by the way of Antonioni once again,
right.
But kind of just move to a different register. And my final remark, since I've read the novel, and you all know that, and I'm very proud of that I managed to do it finally,
and I'm jealous of that.
To prepare, I'll make it available to you. Don't worry.
Thank you.
We'll make it work. So I just want to say that, and that's also something I think you won't find in many descriptions or analysis of the movie, that many, for example, Charles Barr and many other scholars, they observe that Hitchcock changed the ending. And it's true, he changed the ending, he made it more shocking. As you mentioned, there is this Handel Fein, the murderer, prepares rope for himself this time. Right, and he's like hanging himself.
Yeah, from the trapeze rope, which is also a flamboyantly bad taste. It's very, but it's fantastic because it's really over the top. Like, to show the guy hanging himself from the trapeze rope. For 1930, I think it's extremely shocking. It's bad taste. It's pornographic almost, but it's great.
Yeah, you can hear Hitchcock giggling,
yes.
Right, off screen. Yes, I totally agree. Of course, we have there as well some variete influenced shots, right? Like Emily Annings on a trapeze.
Absolutely.
Here we have Esme Percy, exactly shot in the same way, which once again shows the influence of German expressionism. But that's not what I wanted to comment upon. I wanted to say that in the original novel, the ending is much more Hitchcockian, I would say, because in this movie, we have the scene of this false play rehearsal, right? So there's this, inspired by Shakespeare, we have the scene when Sir John, asks Handel Fein to, perform for him. And in the novel, the scene leads to a climax that really, Handel Fein loses his, stability and escapes, and we have a chase scene, which is pretty exciting in the novel because, there we are in London and we chase a yellow cab right to the harbor, and it's really very exciting. And I think the authors, made a lot of effort to make it exciting. And Hitchcock chose it, to change it to a shocking ending. It is shocking. It is pretty, imaginative, and we have a circus, so a big space. But somehow I think like after Blackmail, the ending with which ends in a chase scene would be much more Hitchcockian. So that's for me, that's surprising that he decided not to do a chase scene, especially in a movie which does not have a lot of motion. Let's say it's a bit stagey in a good way. It's not stagey as Juno and the Paycock was. So that's certainly not the case. But I wonder why he didn't choose to include some motion. We have, the opening chase, let's say, or quasi-chase in Blackmail, and, we have the chase, the hero is chased in The Lodger, and here we have a bit of a static piece, this highbrow shocker with hanging oneself. So I was surprised that he changed it.
Right. Yeah, I had no idea that it ended up in the chase, so that would be fantastic. The only thing I would say to Hitchcock's defense is there are some great chases are coming up, so in his movies. So some of them even at Mount Rushmore. This is it from my end. I liked it. I enjoyed revisiting it. And next time we will go back into somehow stagey areas with The Skin Game, based on John Galsworthy play. This will be our next adventure, and I have to say that I'm excited to revisit this film because I don't remember it at all. I don't remember it even what was about. But I'm very excited that we are coming up to Rich and Strange, which I would love to discuss and revisit. I remember it as such a fun movie. So this will be our next episode after the next one. And I wanted to ask you, did you find the book in the library, the Rich and Strange book? Because apparently it's a very interesting book, according to Charles Barr.
Oh, I haven't checked yet, and probably it's too late to borrow it. I mean, of course, libraries are closed right now. I mean, we have only online access. So yeah, I was thinking about checking that, but still I haven't checked. So maybe if I'll be able to do that, of course, I'll let you know and let our listeners know.
Great. Because that would be great to know what's in that book.
I agree.
Okay, so thank you so much for this great talk again. And thank you for listening. We are still in the development stages of our podcast, so every single share that you can offer us, every single review on iTunes, every single recommendation is really priceless. So if you enjoy this podcast, if you like Hitchcock, if you like the way that we are discussing it, please share. We have our fan page on Facebook, Foreign Correspondence Deeper into Hitchcock. You can also email us at hitchcock.podcast@gmail.com. Please do that. And join us on the next 12th episode of our podcast, and please stay healthy at this difficult time. So see you again on another episode of Foreign Correspondence
Deeper into Hitchcock.